What's up guys and welcome back to On The Brick, where today the very first episode of the new Ahsoka series is officially out and I am very excited. And what better way to commemorate the moment than with the ghost? Okay, there were a few different sets that I could have shown off today, but I figured most people would understand why I went with this one. First, I've shown off two other microscale builds that this does scale to, and second, because it's the ghost, does it need a reason? This model was designed by Brickvault themselves, and it contains 478 pieces for the main build, and if you get the stand, it will contain 64 additional pieces. The instructions are already pretty cheap at just $6, but at the time that this video releases, you can get them for 25% off thanks to a sale that Brickvault is currently holding. And if you're watching this in the future, fret not, because you can use my code ONTHEBRICK.FUN to save 15% off of any purchase. So as always, a link to this will be in the description down below. Now this build does come with a huge disclaimer. If you've watched this channel for a while, then you probably know that I don't really care what brand of pieces I use. Lego, not Lego, it's all pretty much the same quality at this point, and anyone saying otherwise hasn't really built with non-Lego. But this model is definitely one that you should use real Lego for. As I'm sure you can tell, I didn't, and for the very first time, I actually regret that choice. I cannot say that about the other two microscale builds that I did because both of those were perfectly fine. So what's the difference? Well, there are two. First, the size of the ghost is just smaller than the other two, meaning that when done correctly, as they were, those models have more stability. But that stability is the second reason and a much bigger point here. When you start building at a smaller scale like this, you have to pick one of two, stability or accuracy. Very rarely can you get both figured out perfectly. And one of my favorite aspects of Brickvault is that they tend to focus on the accuracy of the models. Which does mean that a lot of models have questionable stability, but in certain cases that's a trade-off that I definitely think is worthwhile. Like this one. The end result is a mini ghost that you can have on your desk or with your fleet. And while it's not overly accurate for its size, it's as accurate as I would like it to be, and it still looks great. You look at this and instantly recognize what it is. But I'm not gonna lie, the build was certainly a little frustrating. Emphasis on little. While this is a smaller build, it's definitely for more advanced builders. The ghost has some unique angles and a very distinct shape, something that again, Brickvault still wanted to capture at this small size, which meant that they had to use some illegal techniques. A phrase which here means not everything is as clutch as I would like. The first 80% of this build was great actually, and I was thoroughly enjoying it. But you know how sometimes you're doing a build and then you have to make one connection where the whole thing falls apart and it kind of just taints and ruins the experience? That's what happened here a few times. And that's why it was a little frustrating, because ultimately it wasn't that big of a deal, it's pretty easy to put back together, but it is still frustrating to have the build fall apart and feel like you need to start over. I can't say how much of that is because I used non-Lego, and I can't say how much of that would be fixed if you used real Lego. But I am still gonna recommend real Lego because I feel like it's the better option in this case. After all, full build and stand included, you're looking at spending under $100. But you may have noticed that one of the green translucent dishes for the engine is missing, and that's actually directly related to the stand, as this is pretty unstable. This is actually the worst part of the build for me. Brickvault uses a very similar design with some of their other microscale models, and I have used the stand for those without much problem at all. But the big difference is that the Ghost is very back heavy, so you cannot just sit this flat and have it just stay there. It will try to lift up. So when you have a model like that, the stand needs to keep that in mind and basically counteract it. Which this does technically do, but I never felt comfortable leaving the Ghost on the stand. It really seemed like any time there was the slightest of movements, the whole thing would just fall over. You can get the Ghost on there, no problem, just do not touch it. And lastly, I just want to be very clear, sometimes when there's issues with stability and whatnot, it can just be lack of forethought in the design, but I cannot, in good heart, say that's what's happening here. I think the design is as good as something like this can get. Sure, there's always minor tweaks you can make, and there are some areas that I am personally questionable about, but BrickVault did the best they could when designing this. In fact, like I said, the only area that I really have an issue with are these curved tile areas, because this is just straight up unstable, actually. But once you get everything else in there, it all kind of just holds together and works. So overall, I would give the final design like an 8 out of 10. I would give the stand like a 5 out of 10. And the instructions, I would give like a 7 out of 10. It is extremely cheap after all. And yeah, if you've built this, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. I personally do plan to build bigger versions of the Ghost at some point. That is my ultimate goal on this channel. And if you want to help make that happen, please consider subscribing, liking this video, or checking me out on Patreon. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.